We kind of need some of these AI technologies in order to solve some of the really wicked problems we have with things like climate. We need to be able to amplify our own human capabilities with these technologies to solve really nasty problems so that we continue to flourish.
This is Humble Mind. Our mission is to empower professional wellness and organizational imagination, and this is our podcast. Have a look at what we're doing in our community at join.humblemind.co. The future is an exciting place, primarily because it doesn't exist yet. And if we look at the trajectory and the progress of technology in particular over the last 200 years, we've seen such huge scale changes, because they're brought on by so many big new ideas, big innovation in every direction. It's like we've had the Gutenberg Bible hundreds of times, in healthcare, to education, to driving cars, to going to space, right? It's going crazy. So how can we understand and ride the wave of these big exponential forces driving so much change to build better businesses, to become more sustainable and responsible human beings? What are the new things that we should pay attention to? Are there new models, ideas, tools? And how can we start to, most importantly, think abundantly, think that there's more rather than less and everything going to a zero-sum game? Well, today we're going to be speaking to someone who's from an organization that I really respect and admire and have long since followed. They're called OpenExO, and they help businesses with exactly this kind of question, to think about the intersection of advanced technologies, of strategies, and scalable, bigger thinking. And today, Kent Langley is the person who's with us, and he co-founded OpenExO, and he works as their CTO, and he is a very seasoned professional across so many different sectors of work that he's worked in, across AI, cloud computing, data systems, and his job is to help leaders around the world adopt these new ideas, these new strategies and approaches to better sustainable growth. And he's with us on the podcast today. Welcome, Kent.
Thank you for the very kind introduction, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a big pleasure to have you with us on the podcast with some of our amazing community members here live. And big thanks to Kevin, your community manager at OpenExO, for helping to arrange all this.
Kevin's way more than our community manager. Got to give him lots of credit. He does 1,000 jobs. Kevin's awesome.
Yeah, that's what community managers do. The good ones. Yeah. He is awesome. Yeah. Big ups to Kevin. So I mean, I want to start in about 5 different places because,
okay.
I've only got you a limited amount of time. And anyone who hasn't read the Exponential Transformations Guide from OpenExO, there's also Exponential Organizations, which is a book that was written 10 years ago as well, right, by Salim and Peter, which kind of founded this sort of or at least compiled the big thinking behind what the business does, right? Is there a kind of a brief sort of introduction or a quick way of just putting us in the OpenExO picture for people who might not be familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. 2 things. I've shared 2 links with you to kind of get you started. One is a completely open and free version of the version 2 of the book, which was published in 2024 or 3. Sorry, I don't remember. But that book is what we call the living book. We update it constantly, and we've moved to that model, and it gets indexed. It gets looked at by LLMs. It's really just part of the zeitgeist now. So that's a super fun thing to do. I also shared an AI chat where you can talk to the book through an AI character of the book.
I've done that. It's fun.
Yeah, it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So check that out. OpenExO exists for one reason and one reason alone. We exist to make EXOs. It's really that simple, because exponential organizations operate in the world in a totally different and unique way, with a scalable mindset. They're masters of technology, and more importantly, they're masters of interfaces and communications, which is just one, Alex, just one of the 10 attributes, and sort of the 11th attribute, which we'll call the massive transformative purpose. Salim did create the book in 2014. He collaborated with about 40 or 50 people, I think, at that time, if I remember right. I remember him sending me the first 3 chapters of the book and saying, "Hey, do you think I should publish this?" And I was like, I sent it back all read, and I said, "Oh my God, yes." And I think everybody that he spoke to did that. And that was 2014, 13 or 14. It's been a little while. I think it was, yeah, that's right. It was 2014. We just had the 10-year
Yeah.
anniversary of that book. Over the years, TLDR, that has spawned an enormous community. There are over 40,000 people in the OpenExO community. 800 of them have certified themselves as OpenExO consultants or coaches. Thousands have taken the foundational courses, which are also free online. I can find the link to that for you, Alex, if you want to put it in the show notes or something. I'll find that later and send it to you. We've put a lot of our content free online over the years.
Yeah, there's an abundance there. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have programs, right? So we take the model that's in the book, and we work with organizations and individuals primarily to implement that model these days. And we've done it for companies as large as Procter & Gamble, as small as a one-person startup. It doesn't seem to have a problem adapting in those particular cases. I could go on and on for days, Alex. There's so many tools and resources and people and opportunities to implement. I would love at some point when you are ready to explain I'd call it the 2025 model for OpenExO, because we made some very substantial changes in 2024, which honestly, very few people know about. So if we want to put that on the tick list somewhere, I would love to explain that, because it's turned out to be very powerful indeed for helping do what we want to do, which is make EXOs.
Make EXOs. Love that. Love that. Simple, cuts to it.
That's it. Just do that.
I would love to get into that and give that a shine for sure. I think I also want to be able to sort of just, showcase some of the brilliance of that simple kind of foundational thinking that I got in touch with the first time I read that book, which is just, for starters, thinking about the term exponential. So what do we mean when we say exponential? Yes, it's a maths term. I believe it's got something to do with expressing big numbers, right? It's when you use numbers as powers, right? So, it kind of cumulatively, increases. But what do we mean using that concept by, sort of exponential progress, how we measure things?
So, you know what? There's a couple of different ways I can explain this. One, I'll do it by words, but I just developed something. I haven't even published it anywhere. It's a visualization. But the easiest analogy is if you take 10 steps across the floor and you take your average step is 2.5, 3 feet or 1 meter, you're going to go about 30 feet, right? But if you take 10 exponential steps, meaning with every subsequent step, you go twice as far, you're pretty much going around the earth again and again, right? So that alone, if you think, and now where it touches technology and where it touches leadership and business is the pace of change in exponential technologies. Because when you look at technologies like solar, when you look at technologies like microchips, when you look at the falling cost of LLM inference, or how does that AI you talk to generate an answer when you ask it a question or give it a prompt, all of these things in some cases are changing faster than that doubling rate. They're actually looking more quadratic or super exponential in a lot of ways. How do you deal with that? Right? If you're a business, how do you deal with that rate of change? How do you deal with that is what every single leader wrestles with. And that's what we try to help them do, right? For their countries, for their cities, for their companies, and for themselves. So that is, here's the bad news. People don't natively think like that. Our minds don't work that way. They are not designed to think this way. You have to train yourself to do it.
So absolutely, and I suppose that's why the kind of the power of exponential thinking, and I suppose related to that thinking of abundance is another big term, is required, because so many of the current models or ways of thinking or trying to cope, let's say, with technological change is not working, but at the same time, like the history of technological change is really, really fascinating as well. And that Gutenberg moment, that's I love reading that. It's all of the different sort of massive step changes that have happened on so many different leading edges, so many different areas, right? Are there a couple of those that kind of stand out to you? Particular, whether it was going to the moon, whether it was the first semiconductor, maybe the Gutenberg itself. That kind of has a particular parallel or particular interest.
Yeah, well, my background is in technology. I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years. I've started dozens of companies. I've lived in Silicon Valley for 24 years. I've worked in AI and ML for the last 15, with my first big machine learning project with Dell in 2010, and then worked with Salim to build a global network of effectively a specialized form of digital transformation, right? So almost all of the things I tend to gravitate toward are technology related based or business, right? So technology and business. The one that you just have to talk about today is artificial intelligence. It is the most classic exponential growth curve you can imagine. We've actually been deploying AI for 50 years. No one noticed until November of 2022 when ChatGPT made a better human interface to it, and a model that had some really novel breakthroughs, by the way, which were 10 years in the making. That didn't happen overnight. That took 10 years. So see, you have this long, flat part of these curves that you're on, in some cases 50, 60 years. That is not unusual. Look at the history of LED development. There's a beautiful YouTube video about the history of the blue LED on YouTube. It sounds totally boring, right? It is not. It's absolutely fascinating. I watched it with my 8-year-old, and he was riveted to the screen about the history of the blue LED, And then if you look in economics, you see the same thing happening these days with certain types of stores of value and exchanges of value, like we see in cryptocurrencies. These are money potentially going exponential. Lots of caveats there. We don't have to get into all of that. But the reality is money is going exponential. Artificial intelligence has gone exponential. This is why every single time you open your computer and you read about something AI related, it all changed since a day or two ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been teaching, Alex, this. I've been teaching hundreds of students how to apply artificial intelligence in their professional environment. Taught 300 students in 2024. Every single class, and I run them frequently, is at least 60, 70% different than the class before it, because it's just changing that fast. I mean, over the weekend, on a Sunday, OpenAI released deep research as an adjunct to their O3 mini model and their 4.0 model. And it is stunning, following on the wake of DeepSeek.
Yeah.
and the wake of the operator release, which emulates a human browsing the web to capture information. I used operator this morning to find a better price for a light bulb.
And did you?
I did. 66% off what I was being asked by the original manufacturer.
No way. Crazy. I mean, just the way that you describe even the last week of what's happened with, DeepSeek, all the kind of the China-US fears, then, massive new releases happening so fast. There's a kind of a space race nature to this, isn't there? And many parallels, I think, which people have talked about, but there is that undeniable kind of acceleration of the pace of change when there is almost like a conflict brewing underneath it, don't you think?
100%. What drove the space race? The original one, right? The one from the 60s. It was fear that they were going to basically put weapons in space and obliterate it. Each side thought the same thing. And so they poured enormous sums of money. I mean, even sums of money that by today's standards, adjusted for inflation, look kind of crazy. But just a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, there was an announcement that we were going to put $500 billion, by the way, sourced in an odd way for a government, I'll say, into building AI infrastructure, so that in the United States, in this case, they're wanting to be ahead of the curve. Now, the problem they're going to run into is not building data centers or even servers or chips, although there's issues with chips because of the way that the import, export, and supply chains work still. It's energy, right? How do we make enough electricity to power that much infrastructure? Well, The first big data center that came online in a while was X.com's Colossus. And Colossus is being run on natural gas. This is not what anybody wants to hear.
No.
But that's exactly what's happening. Interesting, right? So we can talk about regen and sustainability and water. Water is huge. You cannot run those data centers without water. Why would you build that in Texas again?
Mm.
There's just a lot of good questions to ask. And so is it like the space race? Yes. Is it different? Yes. And there are more players and there's more money this time. And that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So looking at those forces, the forces that drive these change, across different times, different eras. Right now, we're looking at AI, as you say, as the biggest kind of different transformative force. How do we think of that as a purpose? One of the things that stood out to me when I first read the book when it came out was the idea of that MTP, a massive transformative purpose that leaders now have the opportunity and maybe even the obligation to think deeply about is what they do, what kind of business do they want to create, how do they want to treat people, and how do they want to use technology and a few other processes to leverage that. Talk to me a bit about the MTP, the massive transformative purpose, and how can one leverage that as a concept within a business?
So there's so many things. This is a fairly large topic, the MTP.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is that it is, the analogy I love the most is that it's a bit like a North Star or a lighthouse. When you feel lost, or, you can use it to find your way. That helps me a lot because it will help you make decisions quicker, and making decisions quickly and decisively is crucial for any type of operation with exponential technologies. Because if you're the ostrich with its head in the sand, you're done already. You might as well give up. So the three words: massive, transformative, and purpose matter. So massive means it's so much bigger than you. So what is it that you purport to manifest into the world that is just bigger than you'll ever be in your entire lifetime, even if, like they predict, we all live to 150 or so? What is it that is going to do that? If it's transformative, it's not about you changing. It's about the person with the MTP. It's about the change you make in others, the change you make in the world. And that's, again, thinking outside yourself. That's a theme here with the MTP. And then when it comes to purpose, again, purpose gives you that. Look, anybody with purpose bounces out of bed in the morning and just cannot wait to do the next thing to get toward that outcome, which they have in mind, that just fulfills their purpose. So if you put all that together, massive, transformative purpose, you get something pretty astounding. People get really hung up on this, though, Alex. Some people I've helped, I don't even know anymore how many people make an MTP. I made a tool for that called the MTP Genie. I can share that with you, or I can even show it to you if you want to make an MTP today. That would be kind of interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
As a live demo. That would be kind of fun.
Definitely.
I'm always open to those kind of experiments, right? But this is the MTP Genie. It's actually a Chat GPT. And it does everything you need to get started with an MTP. So
it's
maybe
we do this.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat.
Right.
I made this, and what's unique about this is that it's made of every presentation, all the chapters from all three books. There are three books, actually. It's made from every slideshow, every deck, every report, everything we've ever written, collected, known. Every MTP we've ever collected from successful companies implementing MTPs. It's all baked in here. It knows all of that. It's probably the only place in the world that has all of that in it. So when you want this thing to help you, it's kind of interesting. So if you want, we could do a little fun exercise.
Yeah, go for it. How would you start?
So let's talk to your community members. So do any of you have a purpose or a mission statement or something like that? If so, raise your hand, and if you're willing to share it.
So I do believe we have mission statement, and so our mission. So I'm doing a startup that helps to make creation of courses easier and also to share courses easier. So our mission statement is to help people to share knowledge easier in easier way. So and to promote like simplicity of education and sharing between people their expertise. Basically, make sharing knowledge easier.
Great.
That's good. Okay, let's go with that. Okay, so the way I always will start if I have one already is, and you do nearly have one here. So I will say, is this a good MTP? And treat it like an advisor or a consultant. And so what it will do is it'll use all that knowledge that we've put in there, and it's going to analyze your MTP. So it's telling us that you have a solid, and again, I don't script these things, so just, just take it as it comes. But it says it's a solid starting point, but it might not fully meet the criteria of an MTP. Let's evaluate why. Well, it's clear and concise, and it has a transformative impact. Okay, knowledge sharing is a fundamental force in human progress, but it is saying it lacks emotional or inspirational energy. So does this statement fire you up and inspire others, as we were discussing? It's implying that maybe it's not massive enough. What what industry, community are you talking about? The whole world? Of course, the old adage, somebody who tells you their mission in life is to change the world, you might want to watch out. So you niche down a little bit, maybe. Lacks a clear who and why, who will benefit from this. And by the way, I say that with complete humor, because the MTP for OpenExO is transform the world for a better future. So we're like, watch out.
Watch out.
As they say, we're our own worst doctor. But the possible refinements, and it's giving you some suggestions. Would you empower the world with limitless knowledge? Unlock human potential through open knowledge? Democratize knowledge for a smarter future. So of the three suggestions, I like this one the best. So you'll notice that it's now suggesting commands. There's a whole built-in kind of command menu. If you type /K, it will summarize all those commands for you.
Oh,
and I've even built games in here, Mad Libs and the MTP Party, which we can play. But let's do this. I like this one the best of what you made. Compare that with mine, which I like a lot too. I'll make this bigger, which I like a lot too. And create something novel.
So you don't need to give it extra context, like imagine that you're a star copywriter at a branding firm or whatever. It's like
it's already got all that. This is what you would call an assistant. It's already been given all of that.
Okay.
This isn't like prompting sort of bare roots chat GPT. It's been taught a lot already. So a great choice. Here's your original, right? Here's the refined, and it's giving us these cute little, it doesn't always do that, but today it's being a little cute. It's giving us all these little analyses. And now it says, let's look at a novel version. Unleash knowledge to empower everyone. I like that second one. Revolutionize knowledge sharing for all.
I like that too.
I rather like that one. Okay, so and now let's say, oh, nice work, right? So by the way, I'll use a little tool here. If you hear me talking to my computer, it's just because it helps me type faster. Let's use revolutionize knowledge sharing for all. And why don't you make that memorable? Okay, so MM is one of those commands. I think one of the most often overlooked features of a really phenomenal MTP is once you hear it once, it's in your brain forever. So let me try one on you. Until every child is well.
I love this. Very interesting to play with.
So that's the Boston Children's Hospital, right?
Oh, that's great.
And it gives me chills when I hear it every time, every single time, right? It is unquestionable what that MTP is for, So, all right. So let's revolutionize knowledge sharing for all. And why don't you make it memorable? And I was just going to show you, remember there's these commands. So MM is make memorable. All right, here we go. Here's a more memorable version. Yeah, revolutionizing knowledge for everyone, transforming how the world shares knowledge, or knowledge unleashed for all. That one's a little bit slogan-y. I would probably stay away from that. This one is solid. You could probably compare that to your existing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Maybe we can dive into that a little bit as well, because Humble Mind is a community, but it's also an advisory network on top of that, where there's multiple different services that bubble up to the top, and then the community becomes like a venture studio, like a collaboration hub. So there's all sorts of beautiful ways that communities are being leveraged now, and it's just such a big interest area of mine. Can you talk to me a bit about kind of your approach to building community, but also using community as that, key tool to being, I mean, it's part of scale, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I'll show the diagram here for you.
Please, yeah.
That'll help people who may or may not be familiar with the model. So this is the view. This is the original diagram from the original book, and there are the two acronyms: ideas and scale. And these are kind of your left brain and your right brain, and these tend to be external more versus internal to the organization more. And what we were just talking about was this particular one, the S in scale, is staff on demand. People often get confused when they think, oh, okay, staff on demand means outsourced to a consultant or contractor. No, not necessarily. It's a little bit closer than that. Staff on demand is a person who probably works and operates oftentimes fractionally, but can also be full-time, as if they were what people think of as a traditional employee, but maybe on a different type of contract. And all of this depends on the country you're in, right? It could be a W-9 or 1099 in the United States, depending on if that person you're working with is a business or an individual contributor. I think it's an I-9 in Europe, but there's different versions of this everywhere in the world. Yeah. But the key is that we encourage everyone to keep the things that are absolutely germane to their organization, whatever is unique. As Dan Sullivan would say, what is the unique capability of the organization? Keep that inside, always. Now, you can amplify it by, let's just say data science is a really good example, because especially small companies, they don't tend to have a lot of resources available to them inside their company in data science. But algorithms, right, which is where data science lives, and the algorithms attribute there has become more and more and more important. In fact, you would almost argue that it's moved from the outside to the inside as well, right. You could argue. So the thing to do in that case is, yes, go out and get yourself a data scientist for hire fractionally. Say, they're only going to work for you 10 hours a week, but also hire or assign someone from your inside team to work hand in hand with that data science and act like a battery and soak that up. You need to you've got to have this mindset when you're dealing with staff on demand, because it's not a good outcome if 100% of your most important functions ends up outside the company, right? You're not actually growing, someone else is. So you have to really think about that and find the right balance. And so I always advise people when they're implementing the staff on demand attribute to think about ratios. So at first, if you got nothing in data science, it's going to be 0 and 1, 0 inside, 1 outside. And then over time, if you put the people in place inside to learn from that outside resource, then over time, those will balance out, right? You'll have 1 in and 1 out. Right. And at that point, you now have leverage because you've doubled your capacity. That's cool. Yeah. So put 2 on the outside, 1 on the inside. Now you have 3x. Well, you have 3x, the original 1 that you hired outside. So you see, you're growing quite a lot. Your capability, your capacity, your available knowledge. Example. Yeah. Yes. And then what will happen is that internal person will become overwhelmed, and that's your trigger, right? It's not a bad thing. It's a trigger to understand, oh, okay. What will normally happen is people will try to hire that staff on demand resource and bring them into the company. This happens a lot. It's not always the best solution. Sometimes it works out. It depends on the resource. But the reality is that that's your trigger to get another person in. And I usually say at this point, you're in homeostasis, you're in a good spot, you're probably producing really well. So don't break everything, but make sure that you get enough of new battery capacity inside your company to absorb all that's happening. Now, there's a certain point where you don't care anymore if it's not one-to-one, because the people inside will get really good and they'll be able to absorb all the capability, at least direct and manage and facilitate the capability in a way that ensures business continuity and disaster recovery possibilities in case your outside resources disappear for any reason.
Yeah.
So you're always balancing risk, you're balancing knowledge, you're balancing human capacity, and each person's different. And that's why staff on demand is one of those attributes that everyone wants to implement it very quickly, but they don't always understand the subtleties that come into play. And the fact that everything I just said simply takes time. And there's not a lot of ways to speed it up. It just takes a little time. It requires really good leadership to make sure that it is properly managed over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I see also right next to it is the community part, community and crowd, which also has its own type of management and growth strategy, right?
It does. And oddly, your community often won't start out this way. But if you're running a platform and or a marketplace, well, marketplace being a sort of a specialized platform, I guess you could say, or even vice versa, your community might be your staff on demand. It's quite possible, right? And in our case at OpenExO, a subset of our community, 800 out of 40,000 are actually the staff on demand that, when certified and up to date in their credentials and experience, are the ones that are placed on projects for transformation of organizations. So they are, in fact, we have that. We've effectively smashed those two together.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it. I just love the kind of the melding of those things and the dropping of the lines really between what staff and what community are and how they really can be integrated in a way that's beneficial for everyone across the whole ecosystem, right? Including the client, ultimately, who you are collaborating to work together on, right?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite attributes, by the way. And that was a little bit of a mini class on the implementation of staff on demand in organizations in a healthy way.
Yeah, awesome. And it's also great just to have this up on screen so that those watching our podcast and can check it out. We'll make a separate clip of it as well. Thanks for sharing.
Of course.
Talk to me a little bit about like how and what parts, perhaps all of it, perhaps some of it needs to be adapted, of this approach can be sort of made useful to smaller businesses which are maybe just starting out, which are maybe even working with services as well. Maybe not everything necessarily is only technology in terms of what their product is, but the technology is part of how they might deliver a service. Are there some unique ways to kind of adapt or think about this if you're a founder, maybe you're running a smaller business, maybe you're about to start one, and there's some useful kind of ways to start off with the ideas of scale?
Okay.
Sorry,
well,
scale and ideas.
That's okay. Let's work up what you said and start with founders and then go to small, right? And then we can go to SME. And if you want, we can go to enterprise. But that's kind of a normal progression that people think of, because a founder's a person, and maybe they go and they find themselves a co-founder, but it's usually just one or two, three people that start a company. The thing about startups and all of these attributes, any of them, is that, and even being an MTP as a startup, being an EXO as a startup, it expresses more potential than reality. This is a really important point. When you're a startup, you have not yet achieved product market fit. That is why we call you a startup. Okay. You have no idea if it's going to work, whatever the thing is. If you know it's working already, then you're not a startup anymore. That can happen in an hour. That can happen in 10 years. We have no idea. Okay. But please keep that in mind. So if you're going to implement, and it's also easier for a startup to implement all 10 exponential organizations attributes in an MTP than it is sometimes for a more mature company, because they simply don't have to change as much. They haven't done anything. So I find that when people take the exponential quotient quiz, which is a test you can take to see how much of an EXO you are, it's a short quiz. or survey, startups almost always score extremely high. Why? First of all, they're being more aspirational than realistic about where they really are, and we are all guilty. I've done it myself. I'm like, oh look, I score perfect on the EX I'm amazing. And it's like, well, no, you have potential and you're scalable, but you've not done anything yet. So you must ground yourself in reality, and pick the experimentation attribute first if you're a startup, and learn how to run experiments. This is the lean method. This is the agile. This is all the things, right? So that's startups. And again, I think the number one thing to remember about the EXO model for a startup is that it's just all about potential. And by the way, if you're a startup and you score low, well, then you still have a lot of room for improvement. That's really cool. I mean, and you know it soon. In my mind, when I invest or advise, I'm putting my time or my money into a young company and a founder. I absolutely want them to score perfect on the EXQ. And I want to make sure absolutely that they have that exponential mindset, because whether they succeed or not, you don't know that up front, but whether they do or not, you know they had the chance.
Mm.
Okay.
And just, I want to drill into that. What are some of the signs of that exponential mindset, perhaps even on that individual basis with the founder? Is there a spark? Is there a way they can communicate? Is there an energy about them? Obviously, there's variation, but what do you try and look for?
Okay. There are many different types of founders. Okay. So you have your visionary founders, you have your engineering mindset founders, and all these folks. So they're not all the same. There's not a silver bullet answer to that. But what you can do early on, and I actually try to avoid that thing that you call the spark, because a lot of people have insane charisma and capability to sell, but can't build anything. And that's a problem, right? So when I meet people like that, and their EXQ is perfect, their idea sounds amazing, and man, they're selling it great, I ask them who's going to build it. And so you need to help them flesh out the team, because that is their unique capability. Recognize it for what it is. Don't be fooled. And I don't think they do it on purpose, ever, almost never. But you just, if you're going to invest, as I said, I'm taking the point of view in kind of an investor here, which would be putting in time or money, advising or investing. These are the two different things. So the other thing you look for is detail orientation, because one of the worst things that happens in an early stage company is a lack of attention to critical details. Now, you don't want to get buried in the details. So you just need to find that one or two KPIs or OKRs that really, really can move the needle. For whom? Are you building for your investors? Are you building for yourself? Or are you building for your customers to solve a pain or problem they have? So just good practice when it comes to what you're going to build, how you're going to invest your organization's time come into play. And dashboards, autonomy, and algorithms come into play. So does the founder know how to do those things and actually turn all of those into leveraged assets?
Yes.
To give the organization that leg up it needs, because every startup needs something to get it over the hump. I've worked with enough that didn't make it by now to realize that it's often not about the founder or the idea. It's just about timing, for example. My gosh, I mean, I don't have a scientific study to throw at you about this, but I would say that more startups fail because they got started at the wrong time with an inappropriate amount of resources than anything else. So you say to your founder, well, are you actually making progress toward product market fit? And how would you measure that? Well, the best proxy is usually whether someone paid you or not for whatever you're doing.
Right.
Not always true, but in many cases that's true.
The market is the final indicator. Yeah.
Yeah. As an older phrase, the check writer, right?
Yeah.
The market, and the market being a personification of that. But honestly, if I find a founder who just can't ever get to a point where they can tell me the lifetime value of the customer, over the customer acquisition cost, so that we can calculate how much they should be spending and what they're making on marketing in terms of profitability, Man, that's just a severe lack of attention to detail. And
Yeah.
I want to know these things very quickly.
Mm, mm, mm.
Hopefully that
It's really
answers the
useful.
question. Yeah,
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with startups personally and small businesses. I'd say that's more my bread and butter. I prefer it. I like helping them more. I like helping the disruptors more than the disrupted, I suppose.
Yeah. That's awesome, and that's a great kind of little toolkit to not only hear but also to be aware of for other founders, for other entrepreneurs who are thinking of and understand what kind of levers they need to be pulling in the right way. Um, just briefly, and it's a little left field and sort of off topic, but one of the sort of the fact that so much exponential change is going on around us is the fact that it's also reflected in areas of our lives which are not business or technology. A good example of this is in architecture and the future of, let's say, like city planning, right? You've got the Line out there, which is the major city in Neom, in that part of Saudi Arabia. Just as a sort of a flyer for you, do you have any thoughts about that? The idea of smart exponential cities, and in this case, what they're trying to build, at least out there in the desert.
Yeah. Yeah. I have I love YouTube, by the way, and there's an architect on YouTube who did a really nice expose, and I think she's been revisiting it.
Mm.
Dami Lee is her name. Yeah. And she has a great channel if you want to check it out. But with regards to the Line, building whole cities and things like that, and even if you're building small eco villages and communities, I see that one a lot, where people want to build regeneratively and sustainably, and even get away from the super high tech stuff. We have the massive extremes going on all over. There's a common issue, and that is that they never ever have a realistic sense of timeline. They just don't understand. So when you look at Neom and the Line, I mean, I don't know, but they're going to be lucky to build that in 100 years, much less the timeline that they've outlined. And the reason is that more than half, if you really look at it, and I went through all of their materials that they published. I watched a bunch of videos because I was really curious. A whole city in the desert where it shouldn't be, that's going to use massive amounts of exponential technology, somehow not disrupt the native wildlife, and provide incredible lifestyles for those inside, that isn't like living inside of a space station somehow, and maybe not so fun, So how are they going to do that? And if you look at what they've really written, I mean, this is an estimate, okay, but fully half of what they say they're going to do doesn't even exist yet. So,
right.
Okay, let's zoom out and let's say, okay, what type of an example could we learn from and say, well, that's the track they're on? Well, SpaceX or Tesla, pick either one of those. But I think SpaceX is a better example. From the Falcon 1 to right now, where we are catching rockets with these things called chopsticks.
Yep.
How long did that take? And how much percentage of the way to the goal is that company, that mission that they have, make human life multiplanetary? Great MTP, by the way. Yeah. Right. So, well, like 10%.
Yeah.
Not even, I mean, despite all the incredible progress, and you're going to tell me that the Line is more than that?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Sorry. I mean, I'm sorry, but no. So they might be 1% of the way. And how long has it taken SpaceX? And they're 10% of the way on an exponential curve, by the way, which means they're, I think 50% of the way on, oh gosh, I just made a post about this the other day. I don't remember the number. 50% of the way to an exponential peak, you're 1% of the solution.
Right.
Roughly. Okay. So, all right. If SpaceX is 10% of the way or something, okay. And then if the city just started, I might be wrong. It might be 1,000 years.
Yeah. That curve is still really flat for a long time. Still.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe, I said 100. It's more. It's a 200-year project.
I like what you're saying in a way there. There's a sort of a glimmer of hope in a way, because when you're realistic about the time frame and you change the expectations, in this case to exponential expectations, which come with the beginning part of just realizing that things are slow for a while.
Yeah, slogging
then
it
it
out.
becomes more kind of like, yeah, you got that sufficient perspective to be able to look at it and go, maybe that will happen, and it will happen at the time that it needs to take.
Yeah, but the hope is amplified. Just because we know this, now we can be realistic. And if we apply good practices, things like being in EXO, things like using Elon Musk's 5 rules of innovation, things like just being a scientist, right? Using AI to amplify everything. Because I met with a marketer yesterday and I said, do you remember that marketing triangle? Anybody a marketer on the call? And, they always say, you can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have it good. Which two do you want?
Yeah.
Guess what? With AI, all of a sudden, you can actually have all three. In many cases, you can get it faster, cheaper, and better, which is wild. So apply that to exponential growth curves, and now you can see why certain technologies can kick the curve, and these Gutenberg moments appear to be massing and accelerating.
Yes.
And we've barely. There's a wonderful woman who's passed. She used to say, "This is the tip of the spear," and that's where we are. So I have great hope because I know what an exponential curve looks like, and I know that every single day I open my eyes, something's going to be more awesome than it was yesterday in most cases. You don't get nothing's all awesome all the time, but
totally.
yeah. I'm excited. I mean, but I'm a technology nerd. So of course I'm excited, but I get a little bogged down in things like the politics and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, wow. I mean, wow, we caught a rocket that returned to Earth and we can rapidly reuse it. I'm pretty sure we can solve some other problems too.
So, on that then, like, are there certain curves that you're worried about? That maybe we're on the wrong side of that kind of progress, that we should be slowing down rather than speeding up to?
Oh, that's not where I thought you were going with that. Should we be slowing down instead of speeding up? Well, okay, there's two ways to look at that. Should we be slowing down instead of speeding up? Or is the curve in danger of regressing? Because we're going to hit a wall or something like that. So I want to answer the second one first, which is not the question you asked, I realize, but I want to touch on that.
No, I like how you've extrapolated that. Yeah.
I mentioned electricity earlier, right? Now listen, I say this with zero political or even, I love regeneration and sustainability. I've spent over 2 decades studying and implementing and building permaculture gardens and food forests and things like that as a hobby of mine. But the reality is that without the advent of safe nuclear energy, we cannot progress at the pace we are today with the AI stuff. And that's an existential threat because we kind of need some of these AI technologies in order to solve some of the really wicked problems we have with things like climate, right? So we need to be able to amplify our own human capabilities with these technologies to solve really nasty problems, so that we continue to flourish, right? That we can feed 10 billion people, that and all of these things that we have to worry about. Now, the first part is, should we slow things down? I'll translate it like that in some cases. Well, this is everything's complicated in these areas, but 2 things I would think about are, one is you can't, in most cases, once the cat's out of the bag, short. I mean, look, I can't even say that. I was about to say short of World War, but no, that actually accelerates technology. That's what we've always seen, right? So, no, I don't know that genie goes back in the bottle. In most cases. And so the way things get delayed is by never being brought to light. Well, I'm sorry, but the internet and the web kind of broke that. It's very difficult to keep anything a secret these days. So, and then when people arbitrage across nation states and their laws and their intellectual property rules, you see people effectively disrespecting. So why did why did Tesla effectively open all of its patent portfolio for anybody to use? I stopped short of saying open source because it's not really true, but they opened it, they publicized it, and they said, just use it, it's fine. And what did that lead to? Dominance in charger networks in the United States and trending globally.
Yeah.
Okay, so
markets.
Yeah, so should we slow it down? Maybe. Can we? Probably not. So we need to come up with the right coping mechanisms, and that's often governance. And unfortunately, that is the slowest part of it all because we hate change, people in general, right? On balance.
It's tough though, because it's a tough one because there is still always a good idea for having oversight, not to stop change, but to rather be able to think clearly about the ramifications of what happens with those changes and how it affects people.
Yes.
And that is where I suppose a lot of the disagreement comes in. I think most people can appreciate that as a statement. Yes, we agree on that, but how to manage that becomes tough. And then you throw some money into that equation too, and it becomes even harder.
Well, money messes with us, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah, it does.
I'm reasonably convinced that money originated in the amygdala part of our brain, which is the fight or flight part. I think that's where it lives. And when you have it, you're one way, and when you don't have it, you're another way.
It's a drug.
It's really rough, money. But it's also the ultimate proxy for the exchange of products and services, right? Because it enabled the growth and flourishing of our global economy over time in numerous ways, all geopolitics aside. Money goes back a long way. Those big stone wheels that sat in your yard, a long time ago, a long time ago. So, look, Dario and Moda at Anthropic, they take a very interesting approach to AI safety. They're kind of at the extreme end, right? Compared to what you see happening with OpenAI, who says they're operating safely, but honestly, if you look at the two, they're very, very different. And so he just released, I think it was a paper, a document, a series of tweets. You know how everything comes out these days. It's a multimedia extravaganza. So he just released a bunch of information. I think it was yesterday, possibly the day before, about their new work in crowdsourced red teaming of AI models. See, now that's fascinating. What's he doing? He's allowing
Can you just Englishify that for a...
Red teaming is when you go to a new model and you have a bunch of humans and a bunch of AIs in some cases, test it to make sure it's safe. And when you find something that's not safe, like it's leaking the nuclear detonation codes, right? That would be bad if they were in there. Then you take that out. You retune the model, you take that out, you adjust the system prompts, and you make sure it's safe and it can't be broken. So they had two big things that they just released, more, but two of the biggest. One was now they're going to be crowdsourcing red teaming. So us normal folks can participate in checking to see if their model is safe. Well, what did I say there? I said their model. This has nothing to do with ChatGPT o3 Mini with deep research. Right. Okay, so that's managed in a totally different way. This is that cat that came out of the bag, right? Dario and his team might be the safest researchers on the planet. Has nothing to do with China, Taiwan, other companies in the US, other nation states. Every nation state now wants to build their own data center and have their own AI because they realize that it is a strategic and possibly national security matter. Okay. So, the second thing that they announced that's super interesting is that the model that they're testing now with the new crowdsourced red teaming is, they all but said it's unbreakable. If it can be broken, they haven't figured out how yet.
Yeah.
So it'll get broken. That's all that means, just so you know. But they haven't been able to do it. So, so that's why they're opening up to a broader audience.
Right.
Now, OpenAI takes a totally different approach. They release often and early, and then they wait and they see, and they do what's called an RHLF or RLHF. Sorry, I always get those two letters backwards. But they fix it after it's live. And this is why people perceive the models sometimes getting dumber over time.
Two questions. With these advancements, the individuals, the communities that are fluent in even speaking and communicating, let alone engaging and using these tools for some form of prosperity, is, I should say, there's many people that do not have that vocabulary. So I guess I'm asking, is it possible to have the benefits of all of these tech advancements to be more equitable across different populations instead of kind of increasing these both intellectual and financial disparities? So instead of these models of either domination, I got here first and fastest, is there any room for there to be a more collaborative approach? I mean, with our communities, I'm excited to learn more about the EXO communities, but I know with, Humble Mind is one of the few actualities that give me hope that there are people across all populations involved in the community with that intention as they do their business. And in tech, it feels soulless. And unless we're injecting that, I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, really, really lovely. There are humble minds in tech. They're not all soulless bastards. There's no question about it. But the reality is that you're right. And why is this? Let's look at this from a couple of angles. One is it's the media's fault. You will hear the bad stories and the nasty stories and the cheating and the stealing and the lying and the grifting way more than you'll hear the nice stuff. Okay, this is because that's how news works, because it's like money. It lives in the amygdala. So the bad news just gets more clicks. Okay, and that's really sad. So you got to go seek the good news. I was doing an experiment recently, Rana, that you might like. I can't tell you if it's successful or not because it hasn't gotten a lot of play. But every day I built some AIs, and then every day they report to me the best news in applied artificial intelligence that positively affected one or more human lives. Okay. I wrote AI, I created AIs to tell me that every morning because I want good news. As a human being, I want good news, right? I'm not the clickbait clicker. I really just don't like that stuff. So then I take that, I turn it into a post on X, and then I just publish it. And I say, here's today's good AI news. And I've been doing that for a while to see if anybody would care. Doesn't get a lot of clicks. So we'll see how that goes. I'll keep it up for a while and we'll see.
Yeah, you should anyway.
But, yeah, I just think we need that, right? We need that balance. Now, the thing about, is there hope? I mean, that's kind of what you're asking me. Is there hope for people for everybody, the actual penetration of real skill, leveraging all of these tools, right, that are available to people right now for as little as $0 in a lot of cases and $20 for a lot and $200 a month for basically having a whole team of PhD research scientists in your pocket, okay? That's what just happened. $200 a month. You can have all that. If I started to show you guys some of the research reports I've produced in 15 minutes or less in the last week, your eyes would pop out of your head. It's crazy what's possible now. Is it possible for anybody, let's go with anybody, to learn those processes and techniques? 100% yes. I don't need to guess. I know this because I actually taught 300 people how to do that in 2024 as an experiment to see if there would be demand to do exactly that. Because I wasn't convinced that people even wanted to know yet. I have a long history of building things way too early for the market. So in this case, I said, I'll run a 6-month test. I'll teach as many people as will listen to me. I taught 4 different formats, 300 people, 6 months, and it absolutely worked. And there does seem demand. Now I still have to figure out what I'm going to do with that data because I have a lot of data. But the reality is that there's a very small subset of actions any person can take, and it literally only takes a few hours to go through, and then you will be fundamentally shifted. But there's something that has happened before that. And I'll use an analogy. Stop smoking. Okay. People who smoke generally know they need to stop smoking for the most part. But why don't they? Okay, so if we map that onto people who don't know AI, know they pretty much have heard in something somewhere from somebody, kind of know they need to learn AI, but why don't they? Well, it's because their doctor didn't tell them yet that they're going to die in 5 weeks if they don't stop smoking or they don't learn AI. Okay, now we can't be quite that dramatic with AI. You can be a Luddite, you can go in the woods, you can do whatever you like, but go do what you want to do. But honestly, if you expect to compete in the future of work, you better pick up some skills. And I'm telling you, half a day's effort can change your life. I spent 2 hours on a call the other day with a person who was despondent about, I don't want to tag anybody, who was despondent about their industry, had just lost their job to what they perceived AI. We rooted that out. It turned out not to be true in that case, but simply just needed a little bit of a mindset shift to understand how they could look at this as an amplifier to their own decades of experience and capabilities. And it was a phenomenal chat. I enjoyed it very much. And that was an hour. It was an hour and a half. So I'm just saying, the answer to your question is, I'm paraphrasing your question, but 100% yes, there's hope. No, you don't have to do it. You still have free will. Go for it. Do whatever you like. But the reality is that it is going to be tough. It's tough if you don't know how to use email today, isn't it? To work.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Can I
Please.
just
Absolutely. Dialogue's the best. Yeah.
For me, it's, one of the things of stepping out of structured professionalism is into entrepreneurship, which is abstract professionalism for me. So for
I've
me,
not heard that definition of entrepreneurship. I love it. Entrepreneurship is abstract professionalism. That's pretty funny.
Thank you. And so for me, stepping into new spaces, yes, it's scary, but there's enough curiosity that it brings my courage to the table. I have resources personally that, yes, I get to do this.
Yeah.
I also live in a neighborhood where this is my question, I guess, is, are those of us that have the privilege to have that hour and a half conversation, to even think about exponential thinking and mind sense when it's like, am I going to get deported? Do I have food for my kids on the table? Are those of us that have this privilege, are we being mindful to include all of those individuals in our solutions, directly or indirectly? And if not, how can we inspire that they make those decisions from an intrinsic place and not just
that's where we need
to
start, right? Yeah, ultimately.
Yeah. I'm going to say no, but I'm going to say no I'll say on balance. I don't like the word average, okay? But the word on balance, no, we are not doing enough to ensure that, Rana. You are absolutely tuning into something there that is a huge problem. Mind the gap, the sign on the subway. The gap's getting wider, right? Not more narrow. Now, good news is open source models are catching up really quickly. The bad news is a lot of folks don't have a computer that can even run them. So what are they going to do? This is like back in the day when to use the internet to send an email, you had to go to an internet cafe. What do we need? Do we need AI cafes? I don't know. Maybe. I hadn't even thought of that until just now, right? What would happen if you did like the hole in the wall experiment? Are you familiar with the hole in the wall experiment in India? Oh my goodness,
Oh.
you got to look this one up if you don't know it. A gentleman literally poked a hole in the wall, stuck a computer in there, put software on it that taught kids how to speak English and no instructions whatsoever. And little kids would just come up to it and tap on it, and wow, they learned English. Okay. With zero instruction, and that wasn't even fancy AI or anything. So we need a AI hole in the wall equivalent today. We need that to be, though, embedded deeply into our educational systems, where it can actually interface with the communities in which it needs to exist effectively and at scale. That is not the path we are on. In fact, those same educational institutions are going quite the opposite direction in many cases, and it's really bad. Okay, so I come from a long line of teachers. My personal note, my dad was an entrepreneur and a banker. My mom was an English school teacher their whole careers. My dad used to tell me, he said, son, whatever you do, don't be an entrepreneur and definitely don't go into finance. It's awful. Okay. Right? My mom would say, son, whatever you do not become a teacher. You'll never make any money. Thank God I have your dad. Right? Wait a minute. The guy who told me never to do a thing is the one supporting the family more. And then my mom is teaching her whole life with great passion and skill. They both tell me not to do it. And these days, what am I? I'm often an entrepreneur that teaches. So that just is, there you go. It all comes down to the living room and the dinner table at the end of the day. So that's my advice, right? Is anybody hearing this is take this to the dinner table. If you're so fortunate as to get to sit down for an evening and have dinner with your family. We kind of have a no phones, no computers rule at the table, but every now and then I'll break that rule and we'll just have a chat with ChatGPT 4 Omni with advanced voice mode. It's weird and it's fun, and why not? I just put an article out on LinkedIn a couple of days ago about the thing that executives and leaders need to do to truly shift their mindset and learn more rapidly. It's play.
Yeah. We
got to play. And this is how I learn everything. I break stuff all the time. Right? So it's okay. So, I think what you said there is brilliant. And inside those statements are a lot of phenomenal questions. If you can extract those implied questions and then start working to build answers to them, you actually have the makings of something that can close that gap a little bit, sending it back in the other direction.
It's a great answer. Thanks. And thanks for sharing, Rana. Appreciate that. I want to close off. Maybe you've been very generous with your time. Thanks so much, Ken.
I didn't look at the clock. I'm probably in trouble somewhere.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So yeah, that's okay.
Send them a copy of the podcast afterwards, and then they'll. Yeah.
Really grateful for I'm really happy to have these types of conversations, Alex. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you, and hopefully have you on again soon. So maybe just to close us out, a really big word that sort of resonated with me personally when I first encountered OpenExO, when I started talking to people about it, learning about it, and also something that has opened up as a concept in my life personally is abundance. Is there a way to maybe just give us a quick take on where you think the concept of abundance fits, especially if we are going to be going into a world where, we're not working with abundant oriented structures in the world, how can we I know it's a big question, but just to sort of close us out, how can we think about abundance differently? Or maybe even if someone's thinking about it for the first time, what's a great way to sort of think about it in a useful kind of way?
Okay. My take on this is a little different. Okay.
Great.
So, just so you know, I'll warn you, I read an absolutely beautiful book written by a farmer named Charles Massey called Call of the Reed Warbler. Okay. Call of the Reed Warbler, REED. Beautiful book. It's long, but it's a beautiful book about the history of farming in Australia, more or less. But in that book is a concept called the emergent mind. All right. Now, the emergent mind, in his view, is a property of human evolution and an expression of emergence in complex systems like nature. And farmers are really deeply in touch with this. So it makes sense that a person like him, highly educated, also farming would touch this, right? Would express this so eloquently. So that concept of emergence, this is something that is sometimes directed, but often spontaneously. You don't know where that spark of whatever is going to come from in an emergent property. And emergence happens more at the edges. This is a principle that is taught in permaculture. And if you do any form of permaculture gardening, you know that that boundary between the flower bed and the vegetable bed, or the flower bed and the mulch, is the place where the most life happens. Okay. So if you have all that in your head and you're thinking about emergence when it comes to the concept of abundance, I would argue that abundance is actually an emergent property of complex systems that we've created in many cases and guide, but don't always take stewardship of. Right. So, and unfortunately, it's widely unevenly distributed, as we were just talking about, Rana. Abundance is I mean, look, the richest person in the world could give every body in the world $1 billion and not feel it. It wouldn't change his life at all. That's pretty wild. Okay, I'm not saying he should give away all his money. No, he earned it fair and square. Fine. But come on. Like, that's crazy. So if abundance is an emergent property that has a tendency to find, I think that's a local minima, to use an AI term or a machine learning term, then eventually that wealth will be redistributed again, right? It's a cycle. I think that abundance in that context, Alex, is something that we don't seek to obtain, but we look for a more perfect form of it over a period of time. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's a little hard to explain. Starting to get a little philosophical, but at the end of the day,
I was hoping you would.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's a worthy goal, right? Yep. But honestly, we have no idea what that looks like. It's never existed in human society, as far as I know. There's been little moments of bright light, but for the most part, there's just always been this have-not struggle and a giant gap in between. And can AI help with that? Don't know. It could. Will it? That's a different story. Yeah. So yeah, that's my thought on that. I'm sorry. I know that's a little bit out there, a little different, but I think that we have to strive toward abundance, but we've got to look at equity. Rana, you brought that up. Equitable inclusion of everyone into that. And look, there's proof that this is happening. If you actually go and search for all the good stats, there's a number of websites and documents and things out there that talk about how much less disease there is, how much less hunger there is, how much more wealth there is, how much less starvation there is. There's a lot to be happy about. But we're not even close to where we should be, Alex. So we're not even close to abundance. And I'm not sure we can.
Well, this is where
what you said. One more comment. I'm so sorry. I drew this weird. I'm not going to show it to you because it's a bit complicated. But there's a framework out there called spiral dynamics. Whether you agree with it or disagree, it doesn't matter. There's a concept in it that when you climb to the top, and this is true of Maslow's hierarchy as well, you can be right at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're rocking it. You've achieved self-actualization. You meditate every day. You are at peace and at one with the universe. And then something bad happens to you. Boom. You drop right back down to the bottom. So there's this pendulum swinging. I also think abundance may be a lot like that. We may get it at times and lose it at times.
Yeah, but maybe what you're hinting at is this idea of a seasonality between different waves of how abundance ebbs and flows. It comes in and then it needs to wash out again so that it can wash back in over time.
I love the wave analogy there more than seasons. Seasons are these cyclical things. The waves are coming in and out, and what do they say? What comes in with the tide? I think that's a beautiful analogy. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Great. No, it's so nice to have you with us and to explore, have our heads kind of dipped into a number of different topics. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it too. Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful comments and questions. Thank you all for your time and attention today. That's very valuable.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Humble Mind. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're curious to take a look at our community, if you're not a member, you're missing out. Make sure you head to humblemind.co to check out more and to see what we're up to. I look forward to seeing you there. Until next time.